All right, guys, we are back here with the Pontiac Fiero distributor replacement. I know it's been a little while. I've been busy with all the other stuff on the channel, so I haven't had a chance to get back to this. But we're back on this now because car show season is starting, and we got to get to work on this thing. So, first thing we're going to start with is, in order to get the distributor out, the first thing you got to remove is the ignition coil. It's going to be in your way, so better off to get it out of the way and make your life a little bit easier. It's going to be a very easy removal of the ignition coil. Basically, all we have to do is remove the two 15mm bolts, one here and on this side, that are in your way, and then you can pull the coil right out. Now, to get to this ignition coil on the inside, we're going to have to remove the connector to the distributor here, so that we can get it out of the way because it's blocking where you need to go. Now, so let's get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to unplug the ignition coil by lifting up on the gray and black connector here. Basically, you can just pull the tabs up. Be very careful because with the age of these connectors, they're going to be kind of brittle. And gently just work it up so you get the connectors out, separate them, and there you go, you're done. Now, if you want, you can remove, well, actually a little tough to get to that, but let's see if we can squeeze in here. We can remove the other half, the other connector here. And this is a 2-pin, whoops, where are we? This is the 2-pin connector harness that goes from the distributor to one half of the ignition coil. So we're going to move that right out of the way because we don't need to have that in our way as we're working. And now we're going to disconnect the other connector on the distributor. Have you seen the other video where I replaced this connector because the clip was broken? It's basically the same thing. We're going to squeeze in here and work this connector loose and get it out of our way. So now that that's out of the way, we can just easily go ahead, get our 15mm and remove the connector. The ignition coil. All right, now we're going to go ahead and remove the ignition coil by just, these are 13, it's not 15. I'll be right back with the right size socket. Okay, these are 13mm, not 15. So, get loose. Gotta get my right work. And once you remove the second bolt, you disconnect your coil wire and basically just remove your ignition coil. Piece of cake, easy peasy. That's completely out of your way now. And you can move right on ahead with the rest of the job. Taking the heat shield with you. Now that you have that out, you can see now that you have plenty of access to the distributor bolt, retaining bolt here. Let's see if we can move this harness out of the way so you can get a good look at that. Right down there, there's one bolt that has a clamp that holds the distributor in place. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this distributor cap. Now, one little tip, if you don't want to go through all the hassle of removing and replacing all your spark plug wires, what you can do is just remove the wire stay if you have the original wire stay in the car. Leave all your wires intact on the cap, and we're just going to flip everything over and out of the way. Now, we're going to need 7/32 to remove the screws holding this in place. You can also remove it with a Phillips bit, but I find 2nd 30 to be a little bit easier to deal with. So basically, all it involves is unscrewing the cap, and removing, well, once you unscrew it all the way, lifting and removing the cap and moving it out of your way. So now you don't have to worry about retiming this thing because you leave all your wires intact. And what we're going to do is, if you have a nice, shiny, pristine intake plenum, you're going to take a rag, you're going to put your wire and your cap here. Now what I like to do is I take a bungee cord, I wrap the bungee cord around the cap, and I just use it to hold the cap out of the way. So I can give you guys a look at that. Right there, you can see the cap is out of the way, and we are free and clear to work on the distributor. Now, what you see here is the rotor on the top of the distributor. And this is the distributor itself. Now, what we're going to do is, very, very important that you mark the direction in which the rotor is facing, as this is going to keep your engine completely in time, and you can pull the distributor out, put it back in, and you won't have to worry about retiming the engine. So we're going to put a mark showing exactly where our rotor is facing, and that's where it's going to face when it's time to start this puppy up. Now, in order to make sure we have our distributor timed correctly, we need to make sure that it is sitting in the exact same position when we go to reinstall it. Now, to do that, I'm going to mark that position. I'm laying pointer here, and I'm going to mark right here on the vacuum line where the pointer is hitting. And that gives me the area where my distributor will have to be pointing in order to keep time with the car. Right there on that spot. Matter of fact, this is not a vacuum line, this is a fuel line going to the cold start injector. But this is where my distributor will have to be pointing in order to get it timed right back into the original position. Okay. Now, removing the distributor is a piece of cake. Basically, you're going to remove that one bolt that holds the retaining clamp down, remove the retaining clamp, and then you're just going to lift the distributor up and out of the engine. Okay, now this helps a lot. This is a very long extension that I have with a swivel 15 millimeter, which is going to allow us to get right in on the bolt and the clamp, and then we just have to break it loose. Oops, if we don't slip off the bolt. There we go. There we go, and now we're going to. It is a little tight under here, but you can easily just get it out by hand. And there goes the clamp, which usually will fall right here. And here we go, guys. That's our clamp and our bolt right out of the distributor. Again, easy peasy. This is really a very simple job. Now that that's done, you have to remember you'll have a rubber seal holding the distributor in place. So it may fight you a little bit coming out, or it may just wiggle itself right out. So we're gonna give it a wiggle. And it's also engaged with the teeth. So here we go. There she goes, wiggling right out, and then we'll just have to maneuver it up and out around all of the lines in the engine. Matter of fact, it may be easier to remove at this point the ignition module. You give yourself a little room. And now I can't stress it enough. Do not over tighten these bolts in the ignition module, or you will cause serious damage to the mounting plate. You will strip the mounting plate out, and then you're going to have trouble putting everything back together. There we go. So now we're going to remove the ignition module. And we're going to need a small screwdriver to unclip it. And there we go. Our module is out. Again, easy peasy. Have to clean all of that paste off. Now we can find that removing the distributor is much easier. And there you go, guys. The distributor is completely out of the car. Now we're going to place it next to the new one, and we're going to see how different or similar they may be. Okay, guys, here we have our two distributors. The first one, which we just removed from the car, and our replacement Cardone distributor, which has been updated to the latest and the greatest version of this distributor. Now, if we look very carefully at these two, you can see that there is a major difference here where the magnet sits and the pickup coil. Now, apparently this, I'm assuming, is some sort of a heat shield to help protect the pickup coil from the heat damage it can suffer from sitting in the engine for so long. Whereas this one, you can see, is fully exposed. All of the elements, and you can see here where this one's showing a little sign of wear. They do burn out after a while, but this one seems to still be more or less intact. Now, this Cardone distributor did come with a aftermarket ignition module, which we will not be using. We'll be replacing it with the original GM ignition module that came off of this distributor. Now let's take a look at the distributor gears on the bottom. The gears do seem to be very similar, if not exactly the same. Now, this one does have the brown O-ring, which I got from Rodney Dickman, which has not leaked since the day I put it in. This one has a regular black O-ring. Now, I don't know if this is going to be as leak resistant as the Rodney Dickman O-rings. And to whether I should change it or not, that I don't know. I'm going to think about that before I put this all back together. Here we have our roll pin, which we need to punch out if we're going to rebuild the distributor, which we are going to go through that also. And if you look inside, you can see the magnet design is also very different. As you can see here, it looks like it's a smaller magnet with the teeth going around, and this one seems to have a much more substantial magnet inside that housing. Now, it's going to be really interesting to see if there's any difference in the performance of these distributors. I don't know, but it's going to be interesting to find out. All right, now we just have to remove the ignition modules, install my own heatsink coating, as I don't really know what they used on this one. Looks like the same heat paste that they use in all of them. And we're going to keep going with this. Now this one has just regular Phillips screws holding in the ignition module. We may be substituting the other bolts. There we go. And now we're going to just pop the module off. And here we can see that it does have a bit of that heat sink paste on there to protect it. We're going to unplug it. And we don't really know who makes this module, as these are the only identification numbers on it. I have to see if I can look that up. We're definitely more interested in installing our original AC Delco module into this distributor. This is our original GM module. So that is going to happen in the next part of our video. Right now we have the distributor apart out of the car, and we will be getting it ready for install, which will be the next video, in which case we will set the timing, get everything right, and then fire this puppy up. Okay guys, just a couple of notes that I want to give you before I start putting this thing back together. The O-rings that come on these distributors are a known leak source of oil on the Fiero's engine. This is the O-ring that came with the new distributor. This is the Rodney Dickman O-ring. You can tell the difference between them because the ones that come with the distributors are black, the Rodneys are brown. The Rodney is also a slightly thicker O-ring. As you can see here, just I want to say it might be maybe just a millimeter or two thicker than the original O-ring. And it's also, from what I've seen, a much stiffer rubber than the O-rings that come with the distributor. Since I installed these O-rings on my distributors, I have yet to have one fail and start leaking. As a matter of fact, this one, which really hasn't been on the old distributor that long, I'm going to take and just transfer over to the new distributor, and hopefully it will continue to be its leak-proof self. It should work perfectly for keeping us oil leak free. So that's one little tip on these distributors of a product that makes them better. Alright, here we have the Rodney Dickman O-ring installed. It really is very simple. You're just going to roll the O-ring over the entire distributor until it gets to the groove that it's supposed to sit. And once you have it in there, you're pretty much done. Now, another note is that you have to mark the position of the distributor body, not the rotor and the shaft, but of the body in relation to the engine block. Now, since this is a new one, I didn't have a timing mark on there, so what I did was I just created a stencil and I copied the distance from the seam here on the distributor body which is in basically the same position as on the, I don't know if you guys can see that seam there. Basically, I marked it down to the base, and then I measured out the distance between that seam and the timing mark that I put on the old distributor. And that is going to line up with the mark on the block that I made to match up the position of the distributor body, as you have to have the distributor body timed correctly and the rotor timed correctly. The rotor spins on the shaft here, so that when it hits a gear going toward the camshaft, as long as you have it in the right tooth, the rotor will turn into the position you need based on the previous distributor's position. After you have the distributor body seated, you can then spin that to the timing mark on the engine, on the block itself, to match the mark you just put. That on mine, I just marked the distributor here. If you're reusing your old distributor, you will have marked that one also. And you're just going to match this mark with the mark on the block, and the cap position with the mark that you put wherever the rotor was pointing, as we showed when we removed it. And then you'll have everything timed correctly, or very close to perfect. You may have to make some minor timing adjustments based on the any differences that there may be between the old and the new distributor body itself. But you should be almost dead on and very close to perfect timing. Alright guys, that's going to be it for now. Stay tuned for part 3 of this when we reinstall these the new distributor, and we'll see how it looks. It looks, well, let's just make another little comparison here. Height-wise, they do seem to be about the same height. More or less, they seem to be about the same height. I don't have measuring tape here, but they do seem to line up exactly. So we're doing good. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this one. Next video, we'll be putting it all back together. So I will see you on the next one.